Hello, and welcome to the San Diego Unified Office Skills Training, Microsoft Excel Tips and Tricks. In today's video, we'll be discussing about how to create custom tables and pivot tables.
So let's talk about custom tables for a minute. So we're going to get to pivot tables in just a second, and pivot tables are some of the most powerful things that we can do in Excel for manipulating data, and you'll see why in a little bit. Very, very helpful for looking things up very quickly. But custom tables are also helpful as well. And so we're going to go to the Shade Every Other Row tab. And so here we see our worksheet for our pretend school with our pretend students. We have a number of different columns here and a number of different rows. We have 472 or 3 students represented here. And so it's easy enough to see everything that we see here, but sometimes it's hard to be following across to get to the end of a row or something like that. It would be nice if we could make this look a little bit different to make it easier for us. And sure enough, we can. So if we go to the Insert tab ribbon and we simply click on Table, watch what happens up here to the right of Help. Well, first we have to create our table. And so it's going to automatically say, hey, you want us to include A1 all the way down to L474? And the answer is yes. But before I do that, I'm just going to click here. And remember, if we add another student next week and 3 students after that, the week after that, and then the following month, 4 more students, we want to make sure they're included. So I'm just going to make this say 500. I can do that. So this is the table that we're making. We want to include all of it. We have a header at the top. That's helpful. So we're going to say OK. And so now, whatever the last table style that we used, it's going to show up again. And so we now see we're in the Table Design tab ribbon. This is a contextual tab ribbon because we're dealing with tables. But look at all the options that we have. We have so many. And using the preview mode, we can see what all of them look like. And maybe we find one that works really well for our eyes. We're going to go ahead and just select this one right here. And what's it called? We hover over it. It says Blue Table Style Medium 2. So I'm going to go ahead and select on that. And so now it's real easy to see column 2 and column 3 separated because they're opposing colors. They go opposite colors or just every other color, or every other row has a different color, or a dark or light rather. That's helpful. But then we see what it did was it made our headers white. So that's easy enough. We know how to do formatting. We talk about that in our Intro to Excel class. We just go to the Home tab ribbon. We go down to our text color in the font group, and we say, let's make it a dark color like that. And boom, now we can see it all the way down. But more importantly, we have these little drop-down more buttons, right? So basically, this is the table that we saw before in the worksheet, but now it's easier to read. We have infinitely a number of ways to change the way that this looks just by choosing one of these. We're going to just keep the one that we have. We change the color to make it look a little bit better as far as the header colors. And then we have these little more buttons that are there. Oh, look, so it's kind of like what we had on the Home tab ribbon for sorting and all the different things, and down here for filtering. And so, for example, I just did right here where it says grade level. And of course, we have kindergarten through 5th grade. We can see them right here. And then we have some blanks. So I can easily now just say I want to see 3rd graders and say OK. And so now all we're going to see in this list is 3rd graders. No more. And if we had this in alphabetical order, then we'd see all the 3rd graders in alphabetical order, but we don't. That's okay. And then over here, just note that 2 things really. One, we see the little filter icon here in column F, which is telling us that, hey, just so you know, remember, this is filtered. You're not seeing the complete worksheet. You're just seeing 3rd graders in this case. And then over here, we see that we're missing 2, 3, and 4, which means those aren't 3rd graders. And we're missing 6 through 17. Those aren't 3rd graders. And so that purpley color is just kind of reminding us like, hey, look over here. Remember, this isn't a complete list because you are filtered. And so that's helpful. In fact, if we click on this, then we see, sure enough, it's just 3rd. So we can select them all, make them go back that way. And so sometimes just taking your worksheet and then going to the Insert tab ribbon and clicking on Table, it just allows you to have more control of different things that you can do. And just so you know, if you want the color banding to be every other row or every other column rather, going vertically, you can do that too. And if you look up here, you can see that it gives you those options of what to do with that. All right, the last thing that we're going to cover is pivot tables and pivot charts. Pivot tables are one of the most complex features of Excel, which is why we teach it in our advanced Excel. And one of the reasons why it's so complex is because of the so many choices that you have in arranging data. So we see an example here and it says, okay, so row labels, enter from charter school, enter from InfoSnap, enter from out of district, out of state, returning student. Where have we seen that before? Well, let's just go back to total enrollment by date. And remember, we have these different columns that are here. We have entry descriptions, entry codes, all of that kind of stuff that's there. So if we go back to the pivot table, we can see that they're listed right there, all whatever number that is, 8 or so different choices. And then over here, it says number of students. All right, we're not exactly sure what we're looking at yet, but basically it's saying there's one student that entered from charter school, one student that entered from InfoSnap, 9 from out of district, 26 from out of state, and whatever, making up a total of 472 students. Okay, that's interesting, but we're going to see just how powerful that is in a second. And so once we have a pivot table, we can always go to up here to our contextual tab ribbons, and we can make a pivot chart. And we already have one right here. And so we can see those entry descriptions and then a pie chart that's representing those different slivers or percentages, if you will, of these different numbers. So that's helpful. We're seeing a graphical representation. And then our pivot table fields over here, we've got all kinds of stuff, student ID, last name, first name, full name. And with just a little bit of thought, we'll realize that that represents all of the columns that we have on our little pretend school, if you remember. And so we only have student ID and grade level selected. And then down here, we see values, number of students, not quite sure what that is just yet, and rows, entry descriptions. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense because over here, we got the entry descriptions in rows, nothing in columns, but we do have a number of students. So again, tons of choices here, all kinds of things to see. Let's go ahead and do this from scratch. So again, here we have a small version of our, well, it's 474 rows. So there's a lot of data here, but we could see it all in one spot. We'll just ignore these things over here to the right now. And I'm just gonna put my cursor up there just to select cell A1. And so we want to insert a pivot table. Again, we could go to insert, and we could just make it a table, a custom table like we saw before that gives us the drop-down menus for sorting and filtering and all that. That's helpful. But a pivot table is far more powerful. And it says right there, easily arrange and summarize complex data in a pivot table. All right, since we don't know how to set it up yet because we're not really sure how it's working, look at this. We've got recommended pivot tables. And it says, hey, you want us to recommend one? Yes, please. All right, so we're going to click that and see what happens. So the first thing we see is our recommend pivot tables dialog box that opens up. I'm going to move that just over here off screen to the right a little bit. All right, and we see our dancing green ants, and it covers from column A to J, and I guarantee you it goes all the way down to the last student there. And again, if we want to change the source data and make it from A1 all the way down to J1000, just in case we get 500 more students in our school or something, we could do that. But right now, it's just grabbing down to Sarah Zuniga, and that's good enough for us right now. And so here's some recommended pivot tables, and this one's green, so it's displaying it right here. And let's see what it says. It says count of student ID number by entry code. Well, remember that these are entry codes, but I don't have those memorized. So let's see what the next one is. All right. Count of student ID number by entry description. Okay. Well, that's kind of like the example that we just saw. So that's pretty cool. This is the one, in fact, that we're going to accept the recommendation for. But just to let you know, it's suggesting many more. All right. But typically when it's suggesting, again, it doesn't know these are students. It doesn't know that an entry description is, where they came from in the district. It doesn't know any of that. It just sees letter strings and number strings. And so look at this next suggestion. Usually the further down we go, the worse it gets. So sum of grade level by entry description. In fact, we're having a hard time seeing this. So let's move this over and we can grab right here, expand a little bit. Okay. So 3 are entering from that or whatever. Wait, what's this? It's summing, it's adding up. That's not going to work. If we go back to this one, count. Having a hard time seeing all this. It's showing us that there's 1 from charter school, 1 from InfoSnap, and all of that. And as we keep going down, it's doing other weird things where it's adding things up and it's giving us all kinds of other options and choices. And sometimes the numbers make sense, sometimes they don't. The one we're interested in is actually this one. We're going to take that suggestion. All right. And we're just going to accept the data range that it gave us, which is down to Sarah Zuniga for now. We can always change it later for adding more kiddos. I'm going to say, okay. And so watch what happens. We're in total enrolled students. I'm going to say, okay. And it's going to open up a new worksheet to the left. It's just going to call it sheet 1. Okay. And then it's going to give us something very similar to what we saw before. And again, we can use all of our formatting tools if we want. We can move things around, all of that. And so basically it's saying 1 student entering from charter school, we saw that, 9 from out of district, 26 from out of state, so on and so forth, returning students 354 for a total of 474 students. Okay, that kind of works. And remember, it says count of student ID, and then the row labels are entry descriptions. So if we go over here, we see student ID selected, none of the other ones are selected, then entry descriptions. Those are the only 2 selected. That's why we see those 2 items there. But more importantly, down here, we see entry description in rows. Yep, sure enough, those are in rows. And then values, count of student ID numbers. So it must be counting the student ID numbers to know that there's 472 distinct student ID numbers, or stated differently, 472 students. So that actually works. We can do that. But I don't know if this number 1 is a boy or a girl, or this number 1 is a boy or girl, or of these 9, how many are boys, how many are girls, and so on and so forth. So over here, I can select more data. And so let's find gender, and I'm going to select it. Aha. So now it's expanded it. So this is a little bit confusing, but let's just take a look at it for a second. So in row 4, it says enter from charter school 1. And then it's broken down. That 1 happens to be male. There it is. And then the next part says enter from InfoSnap 1. All right. And it happens to be also a male. And then enter from out of district 9, then 3 are female, 6 are male. Well, I don't know about you, but that is really hard to look at. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do with this. First of all, we can go to our pivot table analyze tab and look around on any one of these groups to change some things if we want. We can go to the design tab and start checking out different ways to display this. Hit the little more button here, and maybe one of these makes more sense. But before we even do any of that, I'm just going to say this doesn't look right. And the reason is because we just selected gender. We have gender, entry description, and student numbers, which are being counted. And gender's down here in rows. But the reason they call it a pivot table is because wouldn't it be nice if you could just grab gender and take it out of rows and pivot it up to columns? Oh, okay, that makes more sense. Here's females and there's males. And we'll just use our formatting tools to kind of bring things in a little bit better. Okay, so there's females and males. Can we do more than that? Yeah, we could select both of those, go back to the Home tab ribbon, and maybe select in the middle like this, or this one here, just to make it a little bit easier. So it's easier to read female and male. Well, that's pretty cool. But then we can go to the Design tab ribbon, and we could say, well, maybe there's a way that makes this look a little bit better. So we kind of search around, and I kind of like this one right here. That works for me. So I'm going to say, okay. And then right here, I'm going to try and shrink this grand total down just a little bit. Maybe not that much. All right. So we can see now that there's 1 student entering from charter school, and it's male. And then 1 student entering from InfoSnap, and that's also male. And then out of the 9 from out of the district, 6 are male, 3 are females. That's pretty cool. And by the way, this just disappeared over here. So did our contextual tab ribbons. It's because I clicked outside of it. If I click back anywhere on any one of these, it'll bring back our pivot table fields that we can then adjust and do all kinds of crazy things, moving columns down to rows and vice versa. And again, we could click on all these and show you what it looks like, but it will just absolutely confuse us because there's so many choices. We'll be compounding choice after choice after choice and then going back and forth. So we're just going to keep this simple. So now we've got this great chart here and we're thinking, okay, Mr. J, that's great. You made it kind of a dark gray slate blue with some black and whatever. And I can see the difference between male and female totals for all these things. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. So all of a sudden, your boss, or maybe you're the boss, and you're thinking, okay, I need to know all of the students that have come from out of state. Because here in California at our elementary school, we have some Title IX things that we got to deal with that we make sure we deal with. So I want to know all of the students that come from out of state. All right. And so we see there's 26 of them. Check this out. Watch what happens down here. Here we are in sheet one. We could rename it to whatever we want just by double clicking on it. We'll leave it that for now. We want to see who these 26 students are. Where did we get this pivot table from? We got it from the total enrolled student data, A2 through whatever it was, L500 or something. And so there's 26 students that enter from out of state. Who are they? Double click. There they are, 100%. So there are the 26 students. Goes down to row 27 because we have a header, but there it is. We can click away. And so we see all of this is our, remember our custom table. Now we have a custom table and it showed up on sheet 2. We were right here. All we did was drill down on 26 and there's the 26. That's how powerful this is. So we go back to sheet 1. And so let's say your principal says, oh, wait a minute, that's both male and female. I made a mistake. I actually want to see just the females because we're going to make sure that we're doing some special Title IX stuff for our students who are coming in from out of there. So you'll say, okay, no problem. And we look over here and say out of state, 14 females. Who are they, I wonder? Let's find out. Double click. And now it opened up sheet 3 and there they are. This is the 14 students. This is their names, all their data from that. And we have this like custom table, this super table that's there. So that is the power of all things pivot tables. And of course, we talked about the idea with a pivot table that you could make a pivot chart that reflects this data. And so if we click on pivot table, analyze this contextual tab ribbon, and again, we have 2, so we can, make lots of different choices here. But on this one, down past these different groups, data group, action group, calculations, in the tools group, we have a pivot chart. And so if we click that, then it's going to say, well, what kind of chart do you want? Do we want it to be a bar chart, kind of like this example right here? Or do we want it to be like a pie chart or something? Let's go ahead and just pick this one just for fun. I'm going to say, okay. And so there it is. And so just like when we use regular charts, we can do some things to this and move some things around. This is pretty cool. So we see the graphical representation of all of this data that's right there. Okay. And we have all of the different entry descriptions. But look at this. What if we want to filter it? No problem. Let's just select this one and that one and that one. Okay. Now we only see those 3 that we just selected. And we see that there's a filter involved. So if we go back, we could say select all, bring it back to where it was. We could do that. So that's pretty cool. But wait, there's more. Let's just shrink this down. Let's see if we can move this over a little bit. There we go. Squeeze that up just a little bit. Okay, so we have this plus sign here. What's that for? That's so we can figure out which chart elements that we want to include. All right, and you can see the different things that we have there. So we see these things are tall, and we look over here, and this one's a little bit above 200, but maybe we want to use data labels. Oh, okay, it's exactly 204. So we have all those choices as well. But look at this. Now we can do styles. Wait a minute. Maybe we can find it up here. Look at this. Because we're in charts, if I click away, those disappear. If I click here, it's pivot table, design, and analyze. If I click here, now it's pivot chart, design, and format. Format allows you to change the way things look as far as typeface and all that. Design, this one's pretty cool. We just have the basic one. That's why the squares are on this one. But if we do this, we can start to hover and use the preview mode and find out which one looks the best. Maybe it's that one. That was a little Tron-ish. That one looks okay. We'll go ahead and select that one. But you have all of these choices and things that you can do, and you can infinitely change up everything as far as which fields you're going to be representing. Again, we can do that here. Right now, I've got both male and female. I could just say just the female and say okay. And now my chart reflects that, and I've got that filter on. I'll just do both of them again and say okay. And again, we're counting student IDs, just reminding us how we're getting these numbers, which is fine because there's the exact same number of student IDs as there are students. So that works for us. That's what's down here. And then again, entry description, we can, select just a couple of these if we want. And so we have almost an infinite way that we can change all this, and we can change all of this data over here and then update our chart. But we're going to stop right there for right now because pivot tables, starting from this data right here, these 473 pretend students, we simply went to insert, got a recommended pivot table, and the recommendation that it gave us is this one right here, where it had the count of student IDs. That's where we got the numbers from. And it said by description, by entry description. And so we just started with that. And then we decided to add to that gender so that we could see if it was male or female. And then again, once we had it divided up like that, because we wanted to find out in or from out of state, we just drilled down on the 14 that were right there, and it gave us the exact 14 all female students, and boom. Now we can access data from a huge school, from a huge worksheet, and using a pivot table, we can just zero in on any part that we want. And so I realize it's fairly complex, but it's because there are so many options for it. All right, so that concludes our presentation for today. Just want to say thank you for everyone coming to learn with us today. If you're watching this video from our YouTube channel, please share it with your colleagues and let them know where they can find this video and others as well to help with our training for all things Excel, Word, and all of the Google Office apps, which are available on that YouTube channel. So thank you so much for coming to join us today, and we appreciate you being here.